Hi, welcome to my lesson. I'm Stuart Jarvis, and here are a list of the materials that you need. Starting with a black and white chalk pencil with something to sharpen it with, range of different sized willow charcoal, a brush, a blending stick, a couple of pen erasers, putty rubber, masking tape, and some sort of straight edged tool, and obviously some paper. So my paper's A2 in size, and these two sheets here contain an image. This is the image I'm going to trace through, and on the back these two A3 sheets are connected with a piece of masking tape that I've run along the back. The first thing I want us to do is to establish where the vanishing point is. I've made a mark here, and it's from that point that we use different coloured pens to establish what are called convergence lines. Now, for Key Stage 2 pupils, I think an image like this should be okay. All you've got to do is to try and detect those lines that follow through using a ruler all the way through to the vanishing point. If you keep a black and white image, they can use coloured pens, felt tip pens. In this case, I'm using a Posca pen over the top. And you can do it as many times as you like, and it's a useful exercise in the pupils working over the top of any photocopy. And this is just using the convergence lines from one side, but you can obviously use it from both sides as well. I'm going to the paper now I'm going to draw on. I'm just going to go around the outsides of it with masking tape. And the reason I do this is that right at the end of the drawing, when everything's finished and you've covered it in charcoal as a drawing, just peeling those away reveals this wonderful white border. And I love it. The pupils seem to love it. And actually, if you're framing a drawing, which you could, or mounting the drawing, it's just that really nice polished edge from all of those kind of crude charcoal marks. You've got this crisp line running around the outside. So just with willow charcoal, I've just put a ground down flush, hold the charcoal flush against the page. And once you've got an even covering, just a little bit of paper towel, rub it in. You have to rub it in order to get that surface. This is called carbon paper, and carbon paper has two sides, a dark side and a grey side. The dark side is the side that we're interested in, and it's that side that faces down like that to the paper. The reason why we're using that is we're using it as a tracing device to go under the image, so that it's easy for the pupils to just scan out, trace out their image. So I'm just marrying it up at this stage to make sure everything is in line. Make sure the carbon paper is stuck down to the paper, and then make sure your image is stuck down also to the paper. That must be really secure so that the pupils don't move it around and create a sort of a double image. You can actually grid out an image for more advanced pupils, but I have had real success with this at Key Stage 3 with Year 9 and some Year 8 pupils. So I don't see any reason why some younger pupils might benefit from that as well. My advice is to use a coloured biro. Biro's a really consistent mark, much better than pencil, because they'll just have to keep sharpening the pencil when they trace through this image. So I'm using red biro, or green biro works well. And before I go too far into the drawing, I just lift it up just to make sure that it's making the mark that I want it to. It's always really important to get the pupils to check that fairly early on. There's nothing worse than going halfway through a drawing only to realise that the carbon paper is the wrong way round. So here I'm just making these marks to some of those key areas. It's worth telling the pupils at this stage as well that they can change the pressure of the mark that they're using. So some of those darker areas obviously can push a little bit harder. And in the centre of the page, where the two photographs are overlapping each other, you've got an extra layer of paper to come through. So that you really do have to push a little bit harder in there in order to get the transfer to properly reveal itself underneath. If there's large areas of dark tone, in this case I'm predominantly just using line, but if there are areas of large dark tone, don't let the pupils just kind of colour in those sections. Firstly, the carbon paper creates sort of almost like a film or a skin on the paper, and it's difficult for the charcoal to adhere to those areas. And then the second reason is it's pointless to do that, because we're only going to go over it with charcoal anyway. So the point really here is just to ensure that the line, here you can see the line down this lamppost, I can see it quite clearly. It's important just that line is established, and effectively we're just making a line drawing. This process does require quite a lot of patience, and this obviously is a pretty complex image. I wouldn't expect Key Stage 2 pupils to tackle something like this, but a simpler piece of architecture, or a simple road, canal, railway line, tunnel, even a skyscraper looking up, all of those elements create a vanishing point, a single point linear vanishing point. And actually, a small plug at this point, it's if you've got Sky Arts or can go back into Sky Arts, one of my lessons on Sky Arts Masterclass is another lesson in single point perspective, a more complex image of the London Underground. So you can have a look at that and you can see a different variation of this, a slightly more advanced variation where I'm not using carbon paper, but I'm using the gridding system instead. Every detail is worth making a mark with, because even these graffiti marks are well worth having down. After all, they are going to form a part of the overall drawing in the end. I want to establish as much detail as I can, using all the materials at my disposal. And therefore, why not have everything down you possibly can in order to refer to? Okay, so here you can see I've completed the drawing. I'm in a slightly different setting, back in the studio at home now. And I've just got a little bit more drawing to do. And I'll show you a bit of a close-up in a minute of what the drawing looks like. But there's a few finishing touches I need to put into it. It takes probably at least a good hour. If you're working, I've got some pupils working half this size, it takes them a good hour. And now, this probably took me longer than that, but the pupils tend not to go into quite the level of detail that you would hope. To be honest with you, they probably don't need to put quite as much detail in as I do. Here we go. So I think I've got an image coming up in a minute which shows you a little bit more about what it looks like underneath. It's just a relatively faint line, but enough line for us to be able to work from. So now just carefully peel off the image and peel off the carbon paper as well. You no longer need that. Carbon paper is great though, because you can use it and reuse it and use it over and over again. So don't get the pupils to chuck it in the bin. Hold on to it. These are called rubber erasers, 2 different nibs here. You can easily get them on Amazon. They are absolutely brilliant. I love them. And this is a classic old putty rubber for broad areas. So we're going to start taking away that mid-tone to begin with a putty rubber. And those larger areas, obviously it's a big, blunt, soft tool, so you're not going to be able to go into too many intricate areas with this. I'm just slicing away a little bit of the sky to begin with. You can mould the putty rubber as well into different shapes, but it will only go so fine before you realise actually you're starting to trespass onto other areas. So I'm straight away into the pen eraser here. Obviously the great thing about putty rubber is that it doesn't leave a residue, whereas this has got fibres all over my page already. Because it's just a conventional eraser pen, but just in a kind of in a pen format. It's an eraser end in a pen format. So I don't normally show my images when I'm working or doing time-lapse stuff for my website or Instagram, but I thought I'll show you kind of how I work or what I work from. And ordinarily I'll be kind of changing and angling the paper in all sorts of different angles and flipping it around. But that's no good for the purposes of a video tutorial, so I've just kept it as it is so you can cross-reference with the photograph my drawing and what I'm doing and how I'm thinking. I used a little bit more putty rubber down there at the bottom, but so far it's mainly the eraser pen, which is a lot of fun. It's great. The pupils love it. They handle it well. Of course, the biggest problem with a medium like this probably is the fact that they're going to get their sleeves caught in it. And their sleeves are going to get absolutely wrecked. So roll the sleeves up, put an apron on, usual stuff. Charcoal's non-hazardous. You can just wash your hands at the end of the lesson, as much as they want to do it before that. A brush of any description. This is kind of like an ink brush, just getting off those fibres. And then now it's down to the charcoal. So we've gone mid-tone, we've gone lighter, and now we're going darker. So we're establishing effectively the third tone. So I'm just getting a different size charcoals out to show you from my box. And this is a blending stick. It's got a posh name, can't remember it. This is a blending stick, and I just use it to work the charcoal into the surface after I've established it down. So this is just a case of blocking in at this stage. There's no finesse. There's nothing really kind of intricate or sophisticated about it. I'm literally just filling in the very darkest areas of the whole composition to begin with. All of those darkest areas simultaneously. So I hope you've noticed so far I'm not trying to complete a particular section or quarter of the drawing before anything else. I'm trying to establish the drawing as a whole. That's a really important message, because that means that you are in control of the tonal values throughout, and you're sequencing or working systematically through the drawing, establishing those values in equal measures throughout. Some areas, I suppose, more pressure than others. Some areas, I suppose, a little bit lighter. But there's a lot of charcoal that's needed, and it's fair to say that in some areas you can go even darker than you think, because charcoal is so easy to remove. So it's probably better you go a little bit darker than you think you need to, knowing that it can come off. Right, so back to the blending stick now. Now the blending stick has a kind of 45-degree kind of chiseled top to it. I'm zooming in here to try and show you what it looks like. And all I'm doing is pushing the charcoal, a bit like I did the ground actually, pushing the charcoal back into the paper to create this kind of flatter outcome, a flatter surface. I don't want really the charcoal to be sitting on the surface like a kind of a dusty mess, but pushing it down creates a layer, the field of tone. And I'm just going to work every bit of charcoal that I've put down in that first layer into the paper using that blending stick. I'll come back to the blending stick a little bit later on because it has another purpose as well. The blending sticks come in all sorts of different sizes, scales. Some are very thick, some are fine, very, very fine, and they're really helpful. They're drawing tools as much as kind of blending tools as well. Okay, the drawing's really nicely coming together now, and you should be able to detect somewhere in the region of about 3, possibly even 4 different tonal values coming through now. And our job, as we're working through this, is to actually stretch those tonal values even further. If you could try to make a mental note of this image now to the final image, you'll see just how much I've stretched the lights and stretched those darker areas. Okay, so back to the eraser pen. Oh no, a bit more blending. And a bit more charcoal. This is, by the way, a scene. This is a photograph I've taken from Birmingham's Digbeth area. Digbeth area is an old Irish area. Digbeth Derwent End, Small Heath. All of those areas in Birmingham, my hometown, are all in the southern part of Birmingham, and are all quite closely connected to Stephen Knight's Peaky Blinders. So this kind of run down, rough, graffitied, sort of gritty area is all connected to that. It's a brilliant place to take photographs. It's a brilliant place to draw and paint. I've done a few drawings, actually about 3 or 4 drawings. They're all on my Instagram, have a look. Back to the eraser pen. A little bit more sort of finessing now. Now, it's really important at this stage I do as much of that eraser pen as possible, because I'm going to fix the drawing with fixative in a minute. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I have to get all of the light areas established first with the eraser pen, get off as much charcoal as I need to, because I'm not going to be able to use that eraser pen once that, just showing you there an example of what it looks like, that fine line. I'm actually going back to the vanishing point a bit here. So I'm establishing that vanishing point on the side, because there's the course of bricks have lines leading towards that vanishing point. And they're not obvious, but I just thought I'd get a few of them in. And then there's a pavement there with some horizontal lines needed as well. So here's the fixative. It's basically very strong hairspray. You can use hairspray. They're about £10 a tin, so quite expensive. So I'm just going to run off now, shake this off outside, find a ventilated area, spray it. Here it is, bring it back. You need probably at least 5 minutes to allow it to dry before you can work back on it again. But there is a really strong, noticeable difference as soon as you start to work on it. So I'm just introducing here the charcoal pencil. This charcoal pencil is much, much darker than willow charcoal. I'll be bringing that into the drawing in a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to come back with the willow charcoal and show you the different types of effect that has and how much darker it is now that I've put fixative down. So fixative not only stops the dusty surface from sort of contaminating, and it grips it to the surface of the paper, and thus allows us to rework willow in and get that 1 grade darker of value. I love it for that. It's so good to be able to sort of come back to it and rework a darker surface. If I was to do that without fixative, it simply would stay the same tone. It doesn't get darker the more you work it, willow charcoal. It just stays that same charcoal grey until you've fixed it, and until you've bound that layer to the paper surface. You can only then, once you've done that, create these darker edges. So you can see already in that window that there's a darker established tone, and I'm just working in here a finer bit of charcoal in that top section there. Okay, so I've advanced a little bit further forward now, and I've introduced the pencil, and I'm really starting to now establish detail. I've got to the point in the drawing. I'm just zooming in here to show you some of those architectural details of the road, lamppost, signage. As it disappears off into the distance, perspective, or the rules of perspective, tell us that objects get smaller, detail gets less, and also, if you're really looking off into the distance, tone gets lighter. Not for this one. We're only looking 50 metres up the road, and the collection of shapes there, in fact, actually go a little bit darker, but we get a really good sense of distance. I think without the vanishing point, the composition would not be as strong. In comes the straight edge tool again, and occasionally, never be afraid of using a ruler. I think it's just as important as any other tool that we use. It's not cheating or anything. It does lose a little bit of that kind of nice organic quality of line, but with architecture, I don't know, why not use a ruler? We're not only using a ruler, of course, with the charcoal, but we're using a ruler in addition to that with... Okay, so this is white chalk now I'm establishing. Now, the reason why I'm using white chalk is because I just need to go that 1 grade lighter. Remember me telling you about stretching the tonal values. Just by introducing, not too much, but just by introducing white chalk and a white pencil, we can establish some really light spots and, more important than that, detail. I'll show you in a minute, but there's some windows in there, within that window that's framing in the background. The background there, by the way, that's Custard Factory. You can see the windows I've established there. The Custard Factory is a real hub of the art mecca of Birmingham. It's a brilliant place. Do visit. Bit of graffiti in there as well. And here the blending stick is just softening some of those lines. I said I'd come back to it to show you what that looks like without just the blending, but it removes those extra bits of charcoal that you don't want, that are too dark. It just softens things. So I'm close to the end now. You can see the white chalk, final touches I'm adding down. And I really feel like those tonal values have really stretched themselves. These final touches are important, but just be cautious, particularly for the more advanced pupils, that they're not absolutely blending everything into some sort of foggy blended mess. Notice in the foreground how I've left marks with the white chalk and the charcoal as well. Charcoal wouldn't be the same if we didn't do that, I feel. It's an expressive medium, it's an immediate medium, and it's one where I think we should celebrate the kind of marks that we can make with it. In fact, before you even start a full-blown composition, why not get the pupils to experiment with different types of mark making that they can do, different types of mark making they can establish. You really explore the medium to its limitations and see what it can do. I sometimes get the pupils as well to draw several 4 or 5 boxes out and try and get a tonal value, a tonal range from light to dark or from white to the darkest charcoal you can. I also did that in my video, another Sky Arts episode on surface textures. I showed tonal values as squares. That's just a really useful reference guide, working from dark to light, and normally have about 3 or 4 different tonal grades. You don't need more than that. You don't need 12 or anything like that. It's just going to get too complicated for anyone, to be honest with you, for any pupil of any age. Okay, so I really like this image, and I chose it to get that sense of distance now. Now, fixative is obviously used, as we mentioned before, but in this case I've used fixative because it's the end of the drawing, and it's the end of the drawing that might end in a portfolio, or in my case I mount them and cover them with cellophane, keep them in my plan chest or folio. Take off the masking. It's a real struggle to take the masking tape off, to be honest with you. It does tear the paper a little bit, but here's the outcome. I hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Please get in touch if I can help you.